And now it's time for a special lesson with Professor Fuchs. Today's lesson, nuclear waste.
I'm Professor Walter Fuchs.
Jesus Christ. Are you okay? Do you want, like, bread? Water?
Beer would be great. Thank you. In a previous special lesson, I talked about fission, which produces energy and radiation. After a certain point, the fuel rods used in a nuclear reaction are no longer able to continue the process of fission. These rods are removed from the reactor and become what is known in the industry as spent fuel, which is a form of nuclear waste. Spent fuel undergoes a process known as radioactive decay, where the fuel essentially burns itself out. Radioactive decay also occurs during fission and over time renders nuclear materials harmless through transmutation. Transmutation is a word that means when an atom of one element literally becomes an atom of another. It occurs naturally in fission when a nucleus is split into two smaller nuclei. The problem with nuclear waste is that it gives off potentially lethal amounts of radiation and is thus very dangerous. The uranium and plutonium in spent fuel have half-lives, which is the amount of time that it takes for half of the material to decay, of up to several thousand years, which complicates matters a lot. Since you can't exactly drop off spent fuel rods at the dump, a couple of options have been developed for dealing with this. To help you understand, I'll be relating these concepts to my own life, where I, formerly a part of a healthy, stable nucleus, have through the fission of a hard divorce and a good bit of radioactive decay in the form of drinking and self-hatred, wound up as so much spent fuel in a useless old rod. The first option is storage, where spent fuel is kept isolated in special containers that cool it and prevent any radiation from escaping. Initially, fuel rods are kept underwater to cool and decay and be hardened by technicians. Afterwards, they either stay there until they fully decay or are moved to dry storage underground or in virtually impenetrable above-ground containers. Storage is currently the most common way of dealing with waste in the United States. In my case, this would mean joining the Navy on a submarine crew and letting my commanding officer harden me into a man who's more ready to face himself. After completing my tour of duty, I'd move to rural Montana and spend the rest of my days quietly drinking myself to death where I can't hurt anybody but me. The second option is artificial transmutation, or reprocessing, where spent fuel is chemically split into its constituent parts and dealt with accordingly. Stable metals and mildly radioactive materials get used for industry or medicine to treat cancer and that kind of thing. Moderately radioactive materials, such as strontium, are put in storage. Highly radioactive uranium and plutonium have the radioactive decay sped up by being bombarded with high-energy neutrons in a special kind of reactor called a fast reactor. These reactors effectively reduce the time span in which the spent fuel will become harmless and can also be used to generate electricity. Moderately radioactive materials such as strontium... I already said that. Well, this would be the equivalent for me of attending intensive therapy, where all of my long-term psychological issues are worked out and replaced with more mundane, everyday psychological problems. So instead of wanting to kill myself every hour of every day, the thought will cross my mind for about 15 minutes once every 2 weeks. After a decent amount of time spent alone in storage, I'd be completely free of all the voices in my head. Unfortunately, reprocessing, which is the preferred method of dealing with nuclear waste, is much more expensive than storage, and not legally mandated, so there are few, if any, plants in the United States who make use of it. In other words, because the college refuses to pay for my therapy, and it's cheaper for me to buy bottom-shelf bourbon and rent a trailer than it is to see a top-notch therapist, I'll finally be at peace in 45 years when my body is found rotting in my armchair, bathed in the glow of Family Feud reruns.